What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Last night I was doing my favorite thing in the whole world to do. Sort Magic cards. I'm being totally serious, too. I actually really enjoy sorting cards. Don't we all? Isn't it really relaxing? Kind of depends on how many cards you have, I imagine. But either way, one thing I noticed going through all my courses was that, boy, I sure do have a bunch of cool-looking legendary creatures what I want to build a couple commander decks around. And hey, maybe when I'm done putting it all together, I'll throw it up on that YouTube channel I got. That ought to be fun. The only problem is that cards cost money to order. I have a limited supply of that, and I really want to build at least one of these commanders, but I'm not actually sure which one I want to build. So that's kind of where you come in. That's right, I needs you. So hang out with me today, and more likely bear with me today as I go through the 5 commanders that I want to build the most.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we are back. Like, subscribe, Patreon. That's basically the entire call to action. I know you want to go ahead and get to the video. And to be honest, I want to make the video. So let's go ahead and jump into it here with kind of an honorable mention, because I can't just talk about the number of things that I said I was going to talk about. I always got to include like one extra thing because I like Magic cards. So let me just say that one of the cards that I came across while I was going through my collection that I completely forgot I even owned in the first place was Ashnod the Uncaring, and I would really like to try this card out. Ashnod the Uncaring is 5 mana, 2 and then Grixis colors for a 1/4 legendary human artificer with Death Touch, and whenever you activate an ability of an artifact or a creature that isn't a mana ability, if one or more permanents were sacrificed to activate it, you may copy that ability and choose new targets for the copy. And first of all, you know anything about me, you know that I love sacrificing stuff. It's right up my dang old bowling alley, but usually I go Orzhov to do my sack shenanigans, but I'd really be open to doing it in Grixis. I've never done that in Grixis before, so it just seems like a really cool commander to double up sack triggers, even on little stuff like Mind Stone. You got middling stuff like, Moni Cold Anvil or whatever, all the way up to big stuff like Koldatha Forge Master, letting you go and get like 2 things, just slapping them onto the table. There's obviously a lot of fun stuff you can do with an Ashnod, and I'm down to see what Blue has to offer when you invite it to the Aristocrats party. Just throw in like an Arkham Dagson and see what happens. It's probably a lot of fun. So I think that sets a pretty good baseline right there. Knowing what you know about me, if Ashnod's just kind of an honorable mention, how excited must I be about the ones that I actually do want to build? So let's take a look at the first one that I'm thinking about throwing together here. It's Mari the Killing Quill. Now, Mari is 3 mana, 1 and 2 black for a 3/2 legendary vampire assassin, great creature types. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it with a hit counter on it. Assassins, mercenaries, and rogues you control have Death Touch, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a hit counter from a card that player owns in exile. If you do, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. Now, I like how this supports 3 different creature types, but the ones that I'm most excited about are Assassins, and I guess to a lesser degree Mercenaries, but just with Assassins, you get to play some really cool old school cards that don't cost that much, stuff like Royal Assassin and Necrotal, and even Kiku Knight's Flower, who I guess apart from Arkham Dagson is going to be the most expensive card I mentioned in the entire video. Most of the cards I'm going to talk about today are going to be like $1 or less, but Kiku is a whole like $3 to get your hands on, but she's also one of the coolest assassins in the history of Magic, and I want to play her, but for that matter, getting to play Royal Assassin and Necrotal again is a nice bonus, and they work really well with Mari. But hey, speaking of old school assassins don't get that much love, you also get to play Wrathy Assassin and Silent Assassin. These have the creature type Mercenary, so your Wrathy Assassin can go get your Silent Assassin, and they can both like take creatures out. They're just really cool dudes that really don't see a whole lot of play, and haven't been printed enough for that matter. I'm pretty sure both of these, or especially, I know for a fact Wrathy Assassin is like only ever been printed in Nemesis. These cards don't get enough love, they don't get enough prints, and in a deck like Mari, you can definitely play with these 2 things, so I'm kind of excited about that. But you also get a bunch of fun assassins from throughout Magic history, all the way up to the modern era. Things like Massacre Girl, which is getting a sweet little retro frame treatment in Ravnica Remastered. Probably costs too much to order that card. You could just order a copy of Massacre Girl for like 40 cents. Why don't you just do that? But either way, you can also play Big Game Hunter. This is a dude that I've kind of always loved, and I'm always looking for an opportunity to play a card like this again. He's really cool. You also get to play with a bunch of not only cool, but importantly, obscure stuff from throughout Magic history. Things like Scarblade Elite, which another card that's only been printed precisely 1 time, and it's got some assassin-specific stuff on it, which you just don't see every day. You've got Termination Facilitator, which is maybe my favorite name for a Magic card of all time. It just strikes me as like really, really funny, but it also looks kind of sick in the Mari deck. And then, of course, you've got Hooded Blightfang, which isn't quite as obscure. I think everybody loves Hooded Blightfang, right? But I guess any excuse to play Blightfang, I will take. This is one of my favorite cards of the last, like, 5 years, and I would really like to reunite with it. I should also mention there's a bunch of rogue stuff you can do with Mari if you want to or whatever, but I really want to focus on assassins. Again, it's a creature type that just doesn't get enough love, and I love creature types that don't get enough love. That's the kind of guy I am. But anyway, let's move on to the next card. I'm not going to like number these. It's not really a list. They're not in order or anything, but the next card I want to talk about, probably a card that's going to make some seasoned Commander players kind of roll their eyes a little bit, because apparently this card is very popular. It's currently in the top 100 Commanders for the last 2 years on EDA Tracks. So I imagine that multiple people have played against multiple builds for Alela. Now, in case you haven't seen it, Alela, I'm just going to pronounce it all the ways you can pronounce it. Taranga Alela, Artful Provocateur, is 4 mana, 1 in Esper colors for a 2/3 legendary Fairy Warlock. Cool creature types again. Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink on this thing, and also other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0. And also, whenever you cast an artifact or enchantment spell, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with it a flying. Whew, so this card supports a whole lot of stuff, which is probably why it's such a popular card on EDA Trek. You can build a fairies deck, you can build an artifacts deck, you can build an enchantments deck, you can build a deck that does all those things kind of at the same time, or like some number of those things, and it's just going to work out pretty well every time. Alela's obviously a really powerful looking card. Whether or not you go the fairy route, there's still plenty of fairy cards you might want to consider using, like Tegwell, which will give you a bunch of card draw and stuff, and then Obira. My heart is on fire. Obira is a sweet little card in standard, first of all, but obviously this transforms Alela's ability from get a 1/1 to get a 1/1 and also ping everybody at the table when you cast one of the pertinent spell types. So that just becomes a really good, again, whether you're focusing on fairies or not. There are a ton of cheap Anthem effects for this deck, and just some of them are etchings of the Chosen. I guess you'll choose fairies, but there's other creature types you could choose. But why not just go with like Intangible Virtue? That just gives all the creature tokens +1/+1. You're going to have a few of them, not just fairies by the time you're done. And then Favorable Winds, because, you know, it's an artifact deck, it's an enchantments deck, it's a fairies deck, but it could also just be generally a flying deck. So throw Favorable Winds in there, and at least all your tokens are going to get the bonus, but most of your creatures will, period. I'm mostly interested in building a kind of enchantments version of this deck because, again, you know me, I like enchantress stuff. So I'm interested in things like Reconnaissance Mission, which is only like 50 cents at the absolute most right now, and it's just going to draw you all the cards in the world. Things like Sigil of the Empty Throne, which I play basically anytime I get a chance to do it. I'll just port it over from Sithis, throw it directly into this deck, feel pretty happy about that. And then Archon of Sun's Grace, which I will do the same thing with. Come out of my Sithis deck, throw it directly in to the Alela deck because, you know, like I said, I like making tokens. If I implied it, I don't know if I just came out and said it, but I do. I like making tokens, especially 2/2 tokens that fly and stuff and benefit from my Favorable Winds and my Intangible Virtue and blah, blah, blah. Archon of Sun's Grace. This is a really fun card. And again, there's little and middling and huge stuff this deck can do. You know, little stuff like Ornithopter of Paradise. I'm going to come down and get myself a little guy. That's kind of nice. And also my Ornithopter gets a little bonus from my Alela. Everything's looking good. Why not? Ornithopter of Paradise, good card anyway. Just that much better in Alela. It's stuff like Sai, which is just going to give you even more tokens if you're going sort of the artifact route. And then, of course, Safara. Again, most of your creatures are going to fly, basically all of them. So it shouldn't be too hard to get Safara down for a reduced cost. And suddenly all your guys have Indestructible, which I hear is pretty good. Just seems all right to me. Now, if I made title cards for all the things that Alela can do, it would probably be like 90 some odd cards and like 30 different title cards I have to make. That's a lot of work. Let's not do that. Let me just say that all the cards I've already listed for Alela are kind of the cards that I'm most excited about playing. I want to go the enchantment route with this, maybe throw in a little Zur. Which Zur am I talking about? Porque no los dos, right? So there's a lot of stuff you can do with Alela that I'm kind of jacked to do. Now, the next thing that I kind of want to build is the only card in this video that's currently legal to play in standard. So place your bets. What could it possibly be? 3, 2, 1. It's Tatsunari Toad Rider. Did you guess Tatsunari Toad Rider? If you did, like, good job. Wow. Now, the legendary Toad Rider not only has some of the coolest art in the entire history of the game, but it's also 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 3/3 legendary human ninja. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, there's that text again, I can't help who I am. If you don't control a creature named Kami, create Kami, a legendary 3/3 black and green frog creature with, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. You can also pay 1 and a green or blue hybrid mana to have Tatsunari and target frog you control not be able to be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. Now, I got a lot of favorite things about this card, but my favorite thing is the flavor, right? Because it specifically does not grant flying. The ability might as well mostly be flying, but at the same time, what's actually happening here is that you are jumping high into the air on the back of an enormous toad, and like, come on. Like, there's not a whole lot of times in Magic where the flavor like really gets me, but this is one of those times where it definitely does. If you don't think that's fun, who are you? Who are you? Get out of here. Now, I could take the super boring route here and just say like, you play Enchantress Presence and Eidolon of Blossoms and like Verduran Enchantress, man, of course you know to play those cards. Like, it's an Enchantress deck. You're green. You play all the green enchantment stuff. I don't really want to just say the same things I said for the last entry over again. So I'll throw a couple of cool new ones in here, like Eaten by Piranhas, which is a cool new card. It's from like the last set that came out. But there's also Witness Protection, which is a pretty similar card. Witness Protection is the blue Swords to Plowshares, and I guess Eaten by Piranhas is the blue Doom Blade. And they both work really, really well in a deck that triggers when you cast enchantments. I guess you could also play stuff like Fertile Ground and Utopia Sprawl, but you probably don't have to have me tell you that kind of stuff either. Like, hey, you should play ramp enchantments in your deck that cares about enchantments and also has green in it. Like, yeah, groundbreaking stuff. So here's a fun little trick. Why don't you play Shimmering Wings or Whip Silk in this deck? And a matter of fact, basically any deck that cares about when you cast enchantments should probably play these just for the lulz if nothing else. But honestly, the color that I'm excited about adding in this deck is black. You just don't see a whole lot of black Enchantress stuff outside of like the occasional Ariette thing, or again, we just talked about Alela, and I guess every now and again you'll see some enchantment shenanigans with her, but shut up. We're talking about Tatsunari on this entry, so now I get to talk about things that you could play in your Alela deck too, like Blightcaster and Doomwake Giant and Grim Guardian. These are all cards that I really, really like, are very cheap to order, and honestly do not get enough love. Grim Guardian is just adding extra damage to the triggers when you do have your Frog Boy out. Doomwake Giant and Blightcaster, on the other hand, these have not been printed enough, man. None of these 3 cards on screen have. They actually haven't been printed that much at all between the 3 of them. But these 2 basically just remove dudes when you cast enchantments, which is a ridiculous trigger that you need to try for yourself if you haven't experienced it yet. I do some Blightcasting in my Ariette deck, and it is fun. I can vouch for that card. I haven't really tried Doomwake Giant out yet, but I certainly should. This is a sweet little card for any deck that's casting enchantments in black. And look, if you really want a meme in this video, if you want like a super fun card to go with Tatsunari Toad Rider and maybe actually take some advantage of that last ability on the card that makes creatures go like sort of unblockable, Yargala Multani, it's a frog. That 18 power monster is a frog, so you just get that through with Tatsunari. Why aren't we doing that in Standard? We could be doing that in Standard. I'm starting to realize that Commander players actually get to have all the fun, especially when I'm just sorting through my box, minding my own business, and I come across a card I never actually knew that I owned in the first place. I don't know where this came from. I think maybe it came from the Jared Carthalion deck, or I don't know which Commander deck this came out of, but I assume that I got it out of a Commander product. Either way, I had never really seen or paid attention to the card Zaxara before. Do you guys know Zaxara is a card? This thing is unbelievable. Zaxara is 4 mana, 1 in Sultai colors, blue, green, and black, for a 2/3 legendary Nightmare Hydra. Nightmare Hydra, it's awesome. He's got Death Touch. You can also tap for 2 mana of any one color. Whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token, then put X+1/+1 counters on it. It's also like in the top 100 on EDA Track. Apparently a lot of people know about this card, and I'm like the last dude in the world to get to learn what this thing is. But I really like X spells, man. I like pumping all of my mana into that big boy every turn if possible. You give me an opportunity to build an entire deck around X spells, I'm gonna take that opportunity, baby. I'm excited to build this guy. We got some brand new stuff that works with Zaxara too, like Jade-Light Spelunker looks pretty swole with a Zaxara. The Goose Mother, let's go. I mean, I guess I could just say like Hydroid Krasis, but the Goose Mother is a little funnier, so let me just throw that one in instead. There's other new stuff too, like Troyan and Nexos. Both of these cards care specifically about X spells, so it looks like Zaxara just got some pretty good cards just in the last few months. You could also throw in Ingenious Prodigy if you wanted to. There's a bunch of X spells that have been printed and actually look really good too, just over the last few months. Zaxara just steady getting cards over the last like 6 months here. It's added a lot to its repertoire, but obviously it had some great stuff already, like Genesis Hydra, which is really cheap, Vastwood Hydra, which is really cheap, and even Stone Coil Steve Austin. Any chance I get to play that card again, I'll be more than happy to take. And it's relatively cheap right now at under $1 too, which kind of surprised me. But so far, I've really only talked about creatures in our X deck. I mean, obviously, most of the fun is going to be playing them big X spells, and there's a lot of them in these color combinations, right? You got stuff like Erebos' Intervention and Black Sun's Twilight and Profane Command. If you want to take out creatures, Profane Command is fun, especially considering you can just like load up a giant X spell and throw it at your opponent's face, and you get like a 6/6 Hydra in the meantime. Let's go. That seems very fun, and there's a ton of like black X spells that do it. Sultai has a couple, like Villainous Wealth. That's a fun card, but blue has a bunch of fun X spells too, and they're not just the ones that draw cards. They're the ones that steal creatures. You can play stuff like Dominate if you want to play a bad card at instant speed, but there's also Mass Manipulation if you want to steal a bunch of stuff and get a giant Hydra, Entrancing Melody if you want to pay a decent cost for your Steal a Guy spell and get a giant Hydra too. So if you just want to steal dudes, blue's got you covered with the X spells, and they'll come with a giant Hydra staple to them, which I freaking love. But maybe my favorite addition to this deck, or like the thing that I'm most excited to try in it, is just Gadwick. You know, we were just talking about X spells that draw cards, and there's a bunch of those I could name. I mean, I want to play Brainstorm again for the first time in 30 years. I'm interested in that proposition, but at the same time, Gadwick is a dude that comes on a body, draws you 1,000,000 cards, and gets you the Hydra, plus the 3/3 body, plus now, whenever you cast blue stuff, you can tap things down. Like, good. Well, come on, man. It seems unbelievably good in a deck like this to draw like 6, get a 6/6, and now you can affect the board state with Gads. So like, there's a lot of cards I'm pretty excited about playing in this deck. Some of that Zax sauce. You only get that joke if you're from the right region of the continental United States. But let's move on to the final card that I want to talk about today. If you do know it though, by the way, Zax sauce is really good, and you know that. You're aware of that if you know what I'm referring to. But either way, number one, it's not number one. I specifically said I was going to try to stay away from that. The last card I want to talk about today. You make enough lists on YouTube and it just kind of comes force a habit to be like, number one of the video. No, okay. The last card we'll talk about today is one that I'm pretty excited about playing with. And I've already told you on Twitter that I have ordered cards for this deck. As a matter of fact, I've ordered cards for like 3 different decks that we've already talked about today, but not enough to completely make them yet, right? I've just kind of tentatively ordered cards for Commander decks that I want to build, and I hope to kind of shift the burden of the final decision onto you guys as to which one I actually finish ordering cards for. But I've really put this one, I've put this one off for too long. I should go ahead and tell you that the final card I want to build is Dina Soul Steeper. Now, Dina is the cheapest commander we'll talk about today, both in terms of like price and casting cost. This is only 2 mana, a black and a green, for a 1/3 legendary Dryad Druid. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. You can also pay 1 and sacrifice another creature to have Dina get +X+0 till end of turn, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. This is another one when I don't want to be boring and I just tell you the same stuff everyone's going to tell you that you already know. Like, oh, Marauding Blight Priest is good in this deck, and Epicure of Blood's good in this deck. Hey, everything you know about me, too. You know, hey, Blood Artist and Zulaport Cutthroat going in my deck. Yeah, totally, Dev. Oh, we get that about this card. You guys know how much I love a good Blood Artist deck, and Dina seems like a pretty good call for a Blood Artist deck. But I also kind of like gaining life a good bit, and there's a lot of cool cards that I want to play with again that do that. You got stuff like Essence Warden and Prosperous Innkeeper, which are, kind of the same card, but they're both cards that I've had a lot of fun with in different contexts over the last 30 years of playing Magic. So getting to play with Essence Warden I'm excited about, but honestly, I'm kind of surprised how excited I am at the prospect of getting to play with Innkeeper again. There's also a bunch of cheap and very fun cards that'll gain you that 1 life at a time that you want for Dina, right? Stuff like Moldervine Reclamation, which is better than anyone thinks. Jedi Offshoot, which is one of the cheapest ways to gain life in the game. And then Spectrum Sentinel, which I imagine is going to gain you a ton of life and set off Dina triggers like all game long, because people sure do play a lot of non-basics. There's also a bunch of utility artifacts in this deck I'm excited about playing because Aristocrats usually does not care about gaining life. It's not like the most important thing that an Aristocrats deck does, whereas this deck really wants to gain life, so it cares about cards like Well of Lost Dreams, which will draw you a bunch of cards before it's all said and done, Tablet of the Guilds, which will gain you a bunch of life before it's all said and done, and that translates into damage. And of course, Zurin Orb. I get to play Zurin Orb again for like the first time since 1996 or 7. I used to love Zurin Orb. It's actually one of low-key my favorite cards of all time, and it's been a very long time since I've resolved or activated a Zurin Orb, and it just seems really, really sick in a Dina deck, especially one that does have access to some land ramp, and I imagine a Green Commander deck is going to play a Cultivator too anyway, so it should be late in the game that you have a Zurin Orb out. You can activate Dina, trigger Dina like 3, 4, 5 times in the same turn pretty easily, and that seems like a cool thing to be able to do too, so I'm mostly excited about getting to play Zurin Orb, obviously, but all the artifacts on screen are pretty cool. So there you have it. That was a lot of information, but that is all the commanders that I'm kind of looking to build at the moment. And now I kind of want to know what your opinion on it is. Now, of course, I could have shown way more cards for all these commanders, but some of them were a little bit obvious. And if I did show way more cards, then we would be here for like an hour and a half. Nobody wants that. So I just kind of tried to show you not only the ones I'm most excited about, but also kind of the cheapest, most budget options in case you're looking to build any of these commanders yourself. But again, now ball's in your court. If you want to see any of these kind of on the channel, my budget take on any of these commanders and how we end up building the deck, just get down to the comments section and let me know which of these you want to see the most. That's basically all ski Kowalski at this point. All I got to do now is to tell you to do the YouTube stuff before you get out of here. Hit the like button, sub to the channel if you haven't done it yet. Maybe check out the Patreon, link in the description. If you want to be the patron of the day, you got to be a patron in the first place, like Christian Harper. Christian Harper's been a patron for a good long time, and I've never once said his name. He deserves some recognition. He helps bring this channel to you. We should all thank Christian Harper more. So thanks, Christian, and thanks all the patrons. And if you consider becoming one, I really thank you. But for the most part, just glad that you're still here. You know what I mean? You're still watching the video all the way this deep into the video when you know I don't have anything more of substance to say in terms of Magic the Gathering content. That's incredible. Thanks for that. At this point, I'm just padding it out, right? Not really. I'm about to get out of here. I love you guys. Just get in the comments section. Let me know how you felt about all the stuff, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.